Howdy, you beautiful gamers. It's me, Leighton, here on about the 12th take of recording this bumper, a thing that I am oh so good at. It's another episode of Late Night with Brian Wecht, and this time we have a gimmick. It's a book club. It's a bad book club. Brian and I read Dan Brown's incredible 2000 classic, Angels and Demons. And we're here to just absolutely wreck Dan Brown's entire career. And he shall sleep unaware on his mountains and mountains of money. But we had a good time, and we hope that you enjoy it because we really suffered for this one. On the note of suffering, that's not a good pitch. On the note of the opposite of suffering, you should join us over at patreon.com/Leighton Night. Spelled like it is in the title of the show. It's the same. You can join us over there for as low as $2 a month. You get access to 4 years of video episodes. At higher tiers, you get weekly mini-sodes, which is just like a regular episode with me and Brian, but mini. We play video games. We do the New York Times crossword. Basically anything that doesn't go on the main feed goes here, including a bunch of movie and TV commentary tracks, many of which are with our good friend Jory Griffiths. And you also get access to our fan Discord, which is a super positive, fun place for a bunch of nerds like you to make new friends. Anyway, patreon.com/Leighton Night. Once again, I am Leighton Gray, and I am oh so very good at recording bumpers. This is going to be a two-parter. So you get part one of the Angels and Demons, and then I think week after next, you get part two. So strap in for a riveting treasure hunt through the streets of Rome as smoldering Robert Langdon and his sidekick Vittoria Vetra spread misinformation. All right, here's the theme song. Amazing.
Much like the collision of matter and antimatter, huh? I mean, we cannot beat around the bush any longer.
No, we can't. I don't know where to begin. maybe we started how this whole thing started.
Let's introduce the show so we don't have to worry about it. Everybody, This is Late Night with Brian Wecht. My name is Brian Wecht. Over here we have Leighton Gray.
Leighton Gray, renowned game developer with piercing blue eyes who I can't even do this.
And a slender frame.
Yes, my lithe, exercised, glistening, sultry, almond-scented.
Smoldering. Yeah.
Smoldering.
Everything's smoldering.
Dr. Brian Wecht with his piercing blue eyes and blue jeans.
And my cool blue jeans. Leighton, I'm kind of a cool professor who, you know, I used to be an Olympic swimmer. They called me the manatee. Did people call you the dolphin? No, the manatee, because of my grace. So today we're talking, this is a first for the show. It's basically a book club. We're talking about the 2000
book burning club.
Yeah, I like that because we are going to annihilate this piece of shit. The 2000 book by Dan Brown called Angels and Demons.
Are you holding your copy?
Right here.
Give us
I ran out of Post-it, so I started dog-earing. I don't dog-ear books. I hate this book so much that I started dog-earing pages.
It's what it deserves.
I ate up an entire thing of Post-its. I literally finished this at 8:14 tonight. That's another reason I needed extra time. And at the last sentence, I audibly screamed. So anyway,
not to spoil too much, but there are many great endings to books and literature. For example, and he loved Big Brother, or he is dancing. He says he will never die, or well, then you've never been to bed with a yoga master.
Oh my God, fucking God! Hey, have you ever seen the one? It was a post. I can't remember if it was Twitter, Instagram, whatever, from a while back about the last page of Frankenstein.
No.
So it's the last page of Frankenstein, the modern Prometheus.
I thought that was Oppenheimer.
Right. Yes, of course. At the very end, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but someone wrote in by hand, like after the final line, it said, also, by the way, you can just call me Frankenstein, not Frankenstein's monster. I'll know what you mean. Said Frankenstein as he rode off into the distance, sailed off into the distance, whatever. Yeah, I thought it was really great. Why are we talking about this fucking travesty of literature?
And I'm not even sure if I have an answer for you, because the way that this started is I believe I texted you sometime mid last week, have you read the Da Vinci Code? Can I explain my rationale for sending this text? No. It was one of those things where I thought of it, and then 0.5 seconds later, I was texting Brian, as all good / terrible ideas start. So a little bit of history for me with Dan Brown. The Da Vinci Code, it came out, caused a huge controversy because of the Da Vinci and the Christian of it all. But I read the Da Vinci Code when I was 8, which is not made up. I was doing a lemonade stand while I was reading the book, and I found that people paid me more money when they saw me visibly reading the Da Vinci Code. But then when I was in middle school, I branched out and read his other books, Deception Point and Angels and Demons, which is actually the prequel to the Da Vinci Code and came out first. I read Deception Point, and this was what kicked off my renewed interest in Dan Brown, because I found a pile of pages that someone had ripped out of a book on the ground in front of my middle school. And of course, much like a young Robert Langdon, I saw this and thought, a puzzle? And so I was trying to figure out what book it was from, because I knew that I had to read it. And the one turn of phrase that stood out to me in these pages was, he clucked ruefully.
Oh.
Anyway, so I read Deception Point, and it was my favorite of the Dan Brown books. And I dropped Angels and Demons in the bath one time, and that's a fat book to drop in the bath, even though it deserves it. So it was this bloated copy of Angels and Demons that I always carried in my hoodie pocket, so I just looked pregnant with literature, quote unquote literature. Anyway, so I've reread these books many, many, many times, and I thought it might be fun to read them with Brian.
Well, and in fact, the text you sent me last Wednesday, less than a week ago, was, have you read the Da Vinci Code? I was thinking it would be fun to do a book club episode where we roast the shit out of a bad book. That was it. Yeah. That's the genesis, pun intended, of this episode.
And then your response was?
Well, actually, my response is wrong. I said yes a long time ago. But actually, I realize now I've never read the Da Vinci Code. I'd only read Angels and Demons. And then I said, if we want to do a bad Dan Brown book, we should do Angels and Demons because it's about physics, sort of. So.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, I always preferred Angels and Demons over the Da Vinci Code, because the Da Vinci Code is literally the exact same plug-and-play formula. And we can get into how goddamn formulaic Dan Brown books are later. But Da Vinci Code commits the sin of being fucking boring, which I cannot forgive. Say what you will about Angels and Demons, but
it's not boring.
It moves. It moves.
We can roast the shit out of this book and will. But I will say it is a page turner. It's fun. It's fast. If you don't stop to think about literally anything that's happening, you can have a great time reading it. I understand why people like this book. I think it's one of the worst things, if not the worst thing I've ever read in novel form. And I genuinely think it's a terrible book, but I understand the good things about it. And the pace is the good thing about it. There's actually nothing else good about it.
Because the moment you pull the thread, the entire thing comes apart. And as a single digit to teenager, of course, this was perfect. You grow up on YA. It's just like big old YA. And mind you, all the talk of being serviced by a particular character in this book, my child ass did not understand that. I was like, oh, does he want her to like clean before he kills her?
I was curious about this, reading this book at an age younger than my own child is now. She wouldn't understand any of this shit.
I think, to be fair, I didn't read it until close to I was maybe 10, 11 when I read Angels and Demons.
Still, I think you probably wouldn't quite get what was going on, right?
No, know. I was like, oh, they're smart. They're being so smart as they go smartly through Europe.
Yes, but I'm talking about the sex scenes. You probably didn't quite understand.
No.
Either.
But I don't think Dan Brown does either.
I am 99% sure. To quote Maximilian, is that his name? Kohler. He had never known the touch of a woman. I believe that is also true about, because by the way, he's in a wheelchair, so he's never known the touch of a woman. What the fuck are we talking about? It's the dumbest thing I've ever read.
Wait, there was some other line in that paragraph, and I'll be looking at my phone because I highlighted all this stuff. But no, as you get Kohler's bitter backstory, and saying that he, because of God and Christians, he never felt the touch of a woman. Subtlety. Dan Brown doesn't know that bitch. I would actually like to start in talking about this book from the very beginning. So I would ask you that you do a dramatic reading of the one-page prologue to this book, because I think it maybe has one of the worst opening sentences I've ever read.
So just a little bit of history with my book. I've had a copy of this book for more than 20 years. A very dear friend of mine gave this to me. This copy is inscribed, and he inscribed it, and I don't think this is telling tales out of school, as a Christmas present. He said, "For my favorite physicist who may think this book is a bunch of horse shit, Merry Christmas." So I had this book. I read it when he gave it to me, because when people give me books, I read them. And I think I am the absolute wrong person to read this book and enjoy it, because I worked at Harvard. I gave talks at / lectured several times at CERN in the theoretical physics division. You know, I am a physicist. I know what he's fucking talking about. Now, I'm not an art historian, or should I say symbologist, someone who studies symbols, apparently. But look, as we all know, the key to really enjoying something like this is to not really know too much about it. And I know way too much about the places that are being referenced here and the topic that is extensively discussed, so extensively that I'm like, why would you do this to yourself? It's the biggest cell phone in modern literature to talk this much about something you don't fucking know about, by which I mean particle physics. I should not be reading this book, because I am destined to hate it, which I did. So,
yes. Well, anyway. We are 24 years late, and, spanning out to the Ron Howard films releases. We're deeply late with things that people have already said. But it's important that these things are said. And I don't want to blame an author. Like, it's fiction. Not everything has to be real or based in fact.
Absolutely
and I
not.
wouldn't have a problem with it if this book didn't start.
Okay, can I read it? Can I read it? Can I read it?
Do it.
Here's the author's note. References to all works of art, tombs, tunnels, and architecture in Rome are entirely factual, as are their exact locations. They can still be seen today. The Brotherhood of the Illuminati is also factual. Now, I might ask, what does factual mean in this case?
As are their exact locations, Brian. It's promising when an author starts a book and in the final sentence of the author's note is just like, you want a grammatical error? I will give you one.
But the interesting thing to me is the difference between factual and true. Like, I guess factual is maybe the better word here, because they are quote unquote facts. But it kind of stood out to me as a tortured phrase. Like, there's a better way of saying this.
There are a lot of tortured phrases in this book.
At one point, he used the word, what was it? Pentagrammal, which is not a word. I checked in the dictionary because it really rubbed my ears the wrong way. And I was like, okay, pentagonal, sure, but pentagrammal? Nope, that's nowhere to be found. Anyway, I'm not quite sure what he means by factual here, but also he commits grievous errors against fact on literally page 1 or whatever. And immediately you're like, okay, everything this guy says is complete horseshit.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the problem with slowing down to check this, because I think in the past when I've reread this book, I reread this in the past year, just as a quick little read, and I probably read most of it stoned while almost falling asleep, as I do with books often. That's the way to do it, yeah. Yeah, and going through it with a fine-tooth comb to talk about it on this podcast, it's just like, You know, I even texted you the like English is the universal language of silence, BTW, which you said is a true thing.
Yeah.
But because I can't trust a goddamn thing the man says, I'm doubting and Googling everything. And half the time, it's just made up. There's a whole thing about how skepticism is evil in this book. That's like a fucking quote.
Oh, that whole fucking thing. All right. Did you want me to read the prologue? Because it's terrible?
Yes, you should read the prologue. Right. And everybody, please pay attention to this first sentence.
Physicist Leonardo Vetra smelled burning flesh, and he knew it was his own. He stared up in terror at the dark figure looming over him. What do you want? By the way, exclamation point right away instead of a question mark at the end of one. La chiave, the raspy voice replied. The password. Because, by the way, this guy doesn't speak Italian. He had to translate it for English.
Yeah.
But also,
to the Italian.
Okay, well, I should just read it and not done it. But I don't. The intruder pressed down again, grinding the white-hot object deeper into Vestra's chest. There was the hiss of broiling flesh. Oh, sorry. Vestra. I said Vestra. It's Vetra. Sorry. Vetra cried out in agony. There is no password. He felt himself drifting towards unconsciousness. The figure glared. Ne avevo paura. Or however you say that. I was afraid of that. Vetra fought to keep his senses, but the darkness was closing in. His only solace was in knowing his attacker would never obtain what he had come for. A moment later, however, the figure produced a blade and brought it to Vetra's face. The blade hovered, carefully, surgically. For the love of God! Vetra screamed. But it was too late. Fucking piece of shit. It's so stupid.
You know, Brian, you have a promising future in audiobook reading.
Why, thank you, Leighton. High atop the steps of the Great Pyramid of Giza, a young woman laughed and called down to him. Robert, hurry up. I knew I should have married a younger man. Her smile was magic. He struggled to keep up, but his legs felt like stone. Wait, he begged, please. As he climbed, his vision began to blur. There was a thundering in his ears. I must reach her. But when he looked up again, the woman had disappeared. In her place stood an old man with rotting teeth. The man stared down, curling his lips into a lonely grimace. Then he let out a scream of anguish that resounded across the desert. Robert Langdon awoke with a start from his nightmare. He had been reading the book Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. The worst thing he'd ever read. This can't be real, he muttered to himself. A book this bad can't possibly exist. But then he looked down, and the book he was holding was the book Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. Wait, said Robert Langdon. Am I a fictional character, or am I real? His smoldering gaze looked down at his own creamy thighs. I'm not going to continue this bit.
Was that all off the dome?
Yes.
That was fabulous.
Thank you.
I would like to skip forward like a page because I want to talk about the way that Dan Brown introduces characters. Because if it's a man, that's one thing. If it's a woman, Dan Brown has a compulsive need to blurt out their weight immediately.
Every single time. I actually looked around in this book because it's so obvious. People, and they're usually overweight, by the way. At some point in the book, I tried to make note of anytime a new male character was introduced, what the description was. And not once did I find an indication of the man's weight. However, every single woman that he introduces, her weight is commented upon. Very few. There's like 5, maybe. Her weight is noted immediately. And it's insane. By the way, also, how does he refer to his protagonist in the book?
Shall we start with how his appearance is introduced?
Well, okay. Actually, before we even get to that, just real quick, page fucking 1 of this book. My name is Maximilian Kohler. I'm a discrete particle physicist. What the fuck are we talking about? A discrete particles are discrete. Discrete means in little chunks, right? As opposed to continuous. Discrete is the opposite of continuous. Nobody in the world says I'm a discrete particle physicist. That is redundant. Particles are discrete things. That's not a thing. That's not it. I mean, yes, being a discrete particle is a thing, but it's redundant. No scientist in the world would call themselves a discrete particle physicist. It's fucking stupid.
But Brian, he's the director of CERN.
Oh my God. Yeah, the CERN, which has a free fall chamber and a gun range.
The Freefall Chamber, which Dan Brown thinks it's very important to note that there's a fat woman in there.
Oh, he's got to talk about
plot relevant.
Yeah, he's got to talk about the fat lady in the Freefall Chamber. Right away, I was like, "Are you kidding me with this discrete particle physics?" And then you're a professor of religious iconography at Harvard University. Symbology. I hate the talk of symbology as if it's a real thing. Look, it might, by the way, the shit that we're saying might be wrong, but please, I'm going to say something Dan Brown has never said. Please fact check us. If I say something wrong, I want to know about it. Such concerns don't seem to ever cross Dan Brown's mind. Anyway, discrete particle physicist fucking got me. Because right away, I was like, I hate this dude. Okay, please continue.
Okay, before we got to that, I forgot about the other thing that I love. On page fucking 2, a knowing groan escaped Langdon's lips. This had happened before.
Much groaning.
One of the perils of writing books about religious symbology was the calls from religious zealots who wanted him to confirm their latest sign from God. Last month, a stripper from Oklahoma had promised Langdon the best sex of his life if he would fly down and verify the authenticity of a cruciform that had magically appeared on her bedsheets. The Shroud of Tulsa, Langdon had called it.
I this is going to be... There we go. Best sex of his life right there. There it is.
This is going to be the first of almost every 5 pages that Dan Brown talks about how much everyone badly wants to fuck Robert Langdon, who is totally not Dan Brown's self-insert at all. Please don't flip to the back and look at the author photo after reading the description of Robert Langdon, which we will now proceed to read.
As Langdon sat on his brass Maharishi's chest and savored the warmth of the chocolate, the bay window caught his reflection. The image was distorted and pale, like a ghost. An aging ghost, he thought. Cruelly reminded. It's the fucking dumbest thing I've ever read.
An aging ghost?
An aging ghost. Cruelly reminded that his youthful spirit was living in a mortal shell. How old is he supposed to be here, by the way?
Oh, it's about to say. Okay.
Yes. Although not overly handsome in a classical sense, the 40-year-old Langdon...
Wait, it says 45-year-old for me. Does it say 40-year-old?
Oh, mine says 40. Yeah, it does. Look.
You can't see shit here, but to be fair,
there.
I'm reading a pirated copy that has some iffy.
Okay.
Interesting. Either way, 40 or 45. Okay, 40. Hello? Old?
You're an aging Yeah. Also, in academic circles, that is like fully mid-career. Like, that is not old. Anyway.
He feels so weird about being old that, like, that dream of, oh, Robert, I knew I should have married a younger man, comes back.
This guy's 8 years younger than I am. I fucking hate him. The 40-year-old Langdon had what his female colleagues referred to as an erudite appeal. Wisps of gray in his thick brown hair, probing blue eyes. Sound familiar? And an arrestingly deep voice, and the strong, carefree smile of a collegiate athlete. A varsity diver in prep school and college, Langdon still had the body of a swimmer, a toned... By the way, we just talked about how much this guy is aging, and he still has the body of a swimmer. A toned 6-foot physique that he vigilantly maintained with 50 laps a day in the university pool. Langdon's friends had always viewed him as a bit of an enigma, a man caught between centuries. On weekends, he could be seen lounging on the quad in blue jeans, discussing computer graphics or religious history with students. Other times, he could be spotted in his Harris tweed and paisley vest, photographed in the pages of upscale art magazines. Upscale art magazines at museum openings where he had been asked to lecture. Although a tough I'm not going to read this next part. Oh, no, actually,
but it has the dolphin
so bad.
in it.
Yeah, that's right, sorry. Although a tough teacher and strict disciplinarian, Langdon was the first to embrace what he held as the, quote, lost art of good, clean fun. He relished recreation with an infectious fanaticism, which, by the way, I first read as fascism, that had earned him a fraternal acceptance among his students. His campus nickname, the Dolphin, was a reference both to his affable nature... What? And his legendary ability to dive into a pool and outmaneuver the entire opposing squad in a water polo match, which he still did. So he's complaining that he's too old to move or whatever, and yet he's a fucking expert water polo player. Everything about this sucks. Also, by the way, what his female colleagues referred to as an erudite appeal. What are we talking about? The guy is so horned up for himself, but only if a woman's looking at him, which is
Brian, he's so old. He's so decrepit at the age of 40.
I will say one thing about this book is, even though it is kind of explicitly racist in some ways, it does not strike me. It does not strike me as homophobic, which is actually kind of a win for this particular book, because all he needed was one gay character. But also, by the way, there are no queer characters in this book whatsoever that you can tell. But at least it's not homophobic. So I'm going to give him a little bit of a point there for not being too gay panicky, which he very well would not have been outside the realm of what I would expect.
That's a low bar to clear.
No. It's surely, look, the guy, I hate this book. I'm trying to find some small positives where I can. But despite being racist, despite being extremely misogynist, at least he's not being homophobic.
Hold on. I really need to find this thing that I want to read, and you tell me how much this sounds like Dan Brown. Now, website's going to be good where it tells you it's unsafe to proceed. Come on, this is a fucking meme.
Blue Jeans. Okay.
All right, let me read this to you. This is actually Dan Brown's alt account. Hi, my name is Ebony Darkness Dementia Raven Way, and I have long ebony black hair. Parentheses, that's how I got my name, with purple streaks and red tips that reaches my mid-back and icy blue eyes like limpid tears. And a lot of people tell me I look like Amy Lee. I'm not related to Gerard Way, but I wish I was because he's a major fucking hottie. I'm a vampire, but my teeth are straight and white. I have pale white skin. I'm also a witch, and I go to a magic school called Hogwarts in England where I'm in the 7th year. I could keep going, but this is the beginning of the classic fan fiction, My Immortal.
Okay, yes. Yeah, it's terrible.
That's what fucking, hold on. I went into another book to get fucking evidence of Dan Brown's ineptitude. Sorry.
Wait, so what does My Immortal have to do with Dan Brown?
Oh, that the way that it starts, it introduces the character by saying, she has long dark hair. Okay. It's the perfect, it's the quintessential version of like introducing a Mary Sue, which Robert Langdon absolutely is. It's the most elementary thing where it's like, I need to start by telling you every detail about my protagonist and how hot they are.
Yes. Okay, great. For a second, I thought you were saying he like had some connection to that himself.
I don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe that's the real Da Vinci Code. You know what TikTok I'm referencing when I say Da Vinci, right?
I do not, actually. I was about to ask.
We'll talk about it later, and I'm going to keep saying it. But here's how the protagonist of Deception Point, whose main character is named Rachel Sexton, is introduced.
Because she has a ton of a question mark.
The woman was attractive, in her mid-30s, wearing gray pleated flannel pants, conservative flats, and an ivory Laura Ashley blouse. Her posture was straight, chin raised ever so slightly. Not arrogant, just strong. The woman's hair...
I'm going to have to stop you because I do have a boner right now. And I just need a fucking second, okay?
Oh, right, you are aroused by this woman's fiery spirit?
Oh, you have no idea. Oh.
Okay, hold on. Let me finish this. The woman's hair was light brown and fashioned in Washington's most popular style. The anchor woman, a lush feathering curled under at the shoulders, long enough to be sexy, but short enough to remind you that she was probably smarter than you.
What?
So yeah, that's the way that he introduces characters. So let's get into the plot of Angels and plot, quote unquote plot. The very sexy, smoldering Robert Langdon is contacted by director of CERN discrete particle physicist Maximilian Kohler.
One thing I do want to say while we're talking about characters here is, and this is something, I am assuming you did notice this, Langdon is almost exclusively referred to as Langdon, but Vittoria is only referred to as Vittoria. What the fuck are we doing? It's like, it's so... stupid.
That's the first rung on the misogyny ladder, and it only gets worse from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just dumb. Anyway.
Oh, you know what's even dumber about the fat woman in the freefall chamber? Langdon looked on in amazement. One of the freefallers, an obese woman, maneuvered towards the window. She was being buffeted by the air currents, but grinned and flashed Langdon the thumbs up sign. Langdon smiled weakly and returned the gesture, wondering if she knew it was the ancient phallic symbol for masculine virility.
You know I underlined that part.
He started down the corridor again. 1 square yard of drag will slow a falling body almost 20%. Langdon nodded blankly. He never suspected that later that night, in a country hundreds of miles away, the information would save his life.
Well, this is maybe the dumbest. Okay, we can get into this as the book goes on, but what is it about the 20% that actually enters into this at all? He jumps out of a plane. He grabs for a thing helicopter. He grabs for a thing that's a parachute. Where are we dealing with 20%? This is not relevant at all. It's like, all you need to know is...
Well, no, he didn't grab a parachute. He grabbed the windscreen cover of the helicopter, which totally held falling from however high it was, which was totally high enough to get out of the radius of the antimatter bomb, which they repeatedly emphasized would destroy the entire... Going that high, they had 6 minutes left on the fucking clock. Are you kidding me?
Not even. I think when they took off, they had 3 minutes or whatever.
Also, spoilers for this dumbass book. Nobody put yourselves through this. We're doing you a favor.
Don't read it. Anyway, please continue with this amazing plot.
So Robert, there's a dead body. Robert gets faxed a dead body with the head turned around 180 degrees and a mysterious symbol branded on his chest saying Illuminati. And Robert looks at it and says, no, it can't be ... Because you see, the word is an ambigram. The ancient sign of the Illuminati, a word that is perfect, legible upside down and straight up.
And it's so advanced. Leighton, how advanced is an ambigram?
That not even modern computers could devise a way to create those words. One of those fucking words is the word air. And ambigrams. Tell us about ambigrams, Brian.
An ambigram is just a little piece of art that's a word that reads the same when you flip it around. It's got what we call in the biz 180-degree rotational symmetry. And to hear this guy talk about it, the finest minds in human society have been trying to figure out how to make words look like this for centuries and have not succeeded, despite the fact that when you look at it on the page, which you do many times, like 6 times, there's one right there.
Wow.
You're like, that's pretty cool.
No, hold it upside down, Brian. We need to be in awe and shock of, my God, how did they do it?
Now, look, ambigrams are cool. This thing is cool. We agree they're cool.
Yeah.
To present them as this thing so complicated, nobody could do it, but it shows up several times throughout the book. One of those, as you said, is the word air. Which is not complicated to do.
Easy mode.
Also, at this point, they're well known. They're popular. They've been around for a while. This is not like...
Nerds make them for fun. It's the idea that an advanced computer program can't do it. And also, like, the fact that it really bothers me that he's like, ambigram is a cool word. That is obviously what they're called now. But if you're going to claim that it's an ancient thing, and for as much as he goes into, like... Here's what it was called back then. Ambigram was coined by Douglas Hofstadter. Like,
yes, that's
am I saying his name right?
Yep, Douglas Hofstadter. Yep.
And then no mention of him when you're doing your like nerd book. That's the ultimate fucking. Are you kid? Like, anyway. Oh, do you like how at the end of the book where he sees the magical Illuminati diamond and then looks at the brand and doesn't recognize what it is, even though he spent the entire goddamn book being supposedly traumatized by seeing these branded on all the Cardinals' flesh.
Actually, I have to get back to this part because this was really good. Please do. There was a really good line there. Orientation. Langdon had forgotten the first rule of symbology. When is a square not a square? The first rule of symbology. Yes, when you take your symbology class, most people won't take this until their senior year of college because it's so advanced. The first thing they teach you is orientation. What? The first rule of symbology? Symbology is not a thing. B, it definitely doesn't have codified rules. C, even if it did, the first one wouldn't be orientation, which isn't a rule. It is a word. The rule would be something like look at a symbol in lots of different ways or whatever, some version of that. It's not orientation. It's so stupid.
The whole book is about how smart Robert Langdon is. And then he repeatedly says the dumbest shit you've ever heard. And you're supposed to still think he's smart.
I also underlined this part. Oh, here we go. This is in chapter 120. 11:51 p.m. Necropolis literally means city of the dead. these things that anyone would think of suddenly occur to him like out of bolts from the blue. Like, it's like, oh my God, when they're just like obvious. Most of them are, by the way, he remembers what Latin is. It's like,
yes. Or he is simply incorrect. Something that even a cursory Google search could have told you was bullshit.
Yes.
Here's a good one. Here's just one off the top of my head. Since the beginning of history, Langdon explained, a deep rift has existed between science and religion. Outspoken scientists like Copernicus were murdered, Kohler interjected. Murdered by the church for revealing scientific truths. Religion has always persecuted science. Which brings us to the central, like, for Dan Brown, this has to be true, even though Copernicus died of natural causes, like, fucking okay. He has to invent this whole thing.
Sun, I believe.
Because the plot hinges on this like fake thing that he has invented and is insisting is fucking real.
Yes. Indeed.
This is about the time where it starts getting really racist. So I feel like we should outline the plot a little bit more so we can get more into the nitty-gritty of all that bullshit that happens at CERN.
You're our resident Dan Brown expert, Leighton. So why don't you summarize the plot of this fast-paced masterwork?
Robert Langdon is a Harvard symbologist who is contacted by the director of CERN, Maximilian Kohler, with a fax image of one of their lead scientists who has been murdered, stripped naked, and branded in the chest with an ambigrammatical symbol of the Illuminati, thus confirming the existence and reign of the Illuminati still today in the year of 2000. So, Maximilian Kohler sends the very sleepy, handsome, and smoldering Robert Langdon an experimental plane that only CERN has, that also, if you fact check, this was literally a demo model that was whatever, fuck it. Then he ends up in Switzerland.
Am I remembering that correctly? The X-33, which sounded like Pee-wee's bike, I believe. I think it's the X1, but yeah, I was like, oh.
Robert is secreted away to the CERN headquarters to meet Maximilian Kohler, and who is in a wheelchair. And Dan Brown is really normal about this guy who's in a wheelchair.
Oh my God, he's such an asshole to this poor guy.
And so he shows up there. Oh, we got to talk about the column crack, because that one pisses me off.
Let's finish the plot description.
Oh, right. You're sorry. I keep getting stuck in the weeds because this book is so goddamn bad. There's the Large Hadron.
Some people say Hadron. I say Large Hadron Collider. Some people say Hadron. They're both right.
Okay. I wasn't even like questioning how to pronounce it. I just fumbled on it. But the discovers that the secret project, the man who was murdered, was working with his adoptive daughter, Victoria, that they created. They recreated the Big Bang and created antimatter, and there are canisters of antimatter, and Robert sees the corpse of Victor, whatever the fuck his name is.
Leonardo Vectra.
Right.
Which I believe is Italian for Leo Windows.
And his eye has been taken out. The only way to get into the super secretive lab is through an eyeball scanner. One of the canisters of antimatter has been stolen. I so badly want to get into the weeds on this. His adoptive daughter, who is also a physicist, shows up, and they realize that the antimatter canister has been stolen. They get a phone call from the Vatican.
His sexy adopted daughter.
They get a phone call from the Vatican that the antimatter canister has been discovered somewhere there, because one of their wireless cameras is broadcasting the countdown, because without the magnetic field that keeps it charged and keeping the little globule of antimatter suspended. Did I mention that they have to keep the antimatter secret because it's a big deal? But now somebody has stolen it, and it's somewhere in the Vatican. But the Pope died 15 days ago, and they're holding a conclave to elect the new Pope. And there's a bomb.
Got poped. Yeah.
And he got young poped.
He got Godfather 3'd.
They can't find the antimatter canister, and an assassin calls. The assassin.
What?
Oh, sorry. The assassin.
There we go. Thank you.
And lets them know that this is the Illuminati's revenge for La Purga, a thing that totally fucking happened of the church murdering a bunch of scientists, and says that the preferiti, also not the fucking word for the preferred papal candidates, by the way.
I misunderstood that. I thought the Purga referred to the church killing Muslims. Is it not?
No, I don't think that's what they meant.
Okay.
It could be, there's a lot of killing by the church going on here, which, to be clear, did happen.
Mostly for good reasons.
Not the way that Dan Brown claims. Where was I? But yes, the assassin has abducted the 4 cardinals who are most likely to be elected pope, and is saying that he's going to sacrifice them on virgin sacrifices on the altars of science. And now it's up to sexy scientist Vittoria Vetra and
even sexier
Harvard
symbologist,
sexy Robert Langdon to solve the problems and go on a treasure hunt through Rome to stop the murders before they happen and find the antimatter canister before it detonates and levels the Vatican. That's the plot. That's the fucking plot.
Spoiler alert. They succeed, and we get a dope-ass new pope at the end. Oh, this new fucking pope. He's actually my favorite character in the book.
2 new popes,
yeah,
actually.
You know what? You're right. 2 new popes. Dos popes, as they say.
There's also an important character here. I mean, there are many important characters here we're glossing over. Let's talk about, is it the Camerlenio? How do you say it? Carlo Ventresca.
Yes, let me actually read this word to make sure that they say it only about 6 billion times. I'd never heard it before.
It's like GN in the word.
Yeah, Camerlenio, I guess. Or is that GN?
I have no idea.
I'm not sure. Camerlengo.
We'll call him Carlo.
I don't know how to say it. Let's call him the camel.
We're not going to do that.
Okay, that's fine.
That's Carlo.
Camerlengo.
He was the Pope's right-hand man, and is a helpful, benevolent figure to the protagonist of the book. Sure would be a shame if he turned out to be secretly evil.
Oh my God. Wait, but there's a character you keep calling Janus? Janus, however. It's Janus, right? I've already said Janus. You keep referring to this person named, what do you say, Janus or Janus?
In my head, I was saying Janus.
Janus, great. We'll call him Janus because
Janus just sounds like Sopranos character Janus.
Yeah, she's a Muppet. So Janus, there's a character, a person.
We have to talk. We need to talk about the assassin.
Oh, this fucking guy.
Some context. In every single Dan Brown book, there are many things about his books that are formulaic. Let's say first chapter is a brief chapter describing a renowned scholar like Victor Vetra or Jacques Sonnier in Da Vinci Code being murdered by an assassin. The said assassin then trails the protagonist with their evil black eyes. And their only trait is that they are evil. At least in Da Vinci Code, Silas gets a little bit of a personality. But for example, in I almost called it Decepticon. Deception Point, and not the song by Le Tigre, is fucking Delta Squad 1, who is never characterized through the entire book. It's just a crack team of assassins hunting Michael Tolland and Rachel Sexton. I hate how much I know about Deception Point. It's like, I'm not okay with it. Anyway, in this book, we're introduced to the assassin, who is the one in the first scene of the book, who is, as is repeatedly, and pretty much the only trait of this man, as is emphasized by Dan Brown, is that he's Middle Eastern and he's evil.
Oh, and he loves to fuck. Don't forget, Leighton, how much he loves to fuck someone all the time.
How he loves to be aroused. The first scene we actually get with him, we never find out his real name, just that he's the assassin.
So for a paragraph, he's talking about how assassin or assassin, however you're supposed to say it, means blah, blah, blah. He says assassin a couple times. And then at the next paragraph, as if it's a reveal at this point, he says it was now pronounced assassin, which is one letter different.
It would only take a symbologist to figure that one out.
This happens all the time where he drops these things that are supposed to be like truth bombs on you. And you're like, yeah, obviously. And it's such a self-own every single time. It makes me so mad.
Anyway, the first scene that we get of his personality is after he's killed Vetra. he goes to a brothel and selects his reward.
His reward, yes.
So he really wants to fuck. And when he's making the threat phone call to Carlo and the Swiss Guard, whose uniforms were not fucking designed by Michelangelo. That's an urban legend, Dan Brown. Fuck. One Google search, you fucking
Which, to be fair, didn't exist when he wrote this. Google was not a thing when he wrote this.
But CERN invented the internet, Brian. They invented the World Wide Web.
They should. They invented it. That, like, little bam right there. I mean, that's not...
Whatever. Again, anyway, when he's making the threat phone call, hold on, I need to find the exact I don't even need to find it because I know what the line is. A woman of spirit, I am aroused, is what he says to Vittoria when she's like, you killed my father on this call, which sets up, literally just comes back around because towards the climax, he abducts Vittoria, and then he binds her and he knocks her out with a pressure point on the back of her head or whatever.
See, that was the stupidest thing I've ever read. And then his dream. What's his dream, Leighton? How does he want her to go out in life?
He wants her to, and this phrase is used multiple times, quote unquote, service him, and then slitting her throat at the moment of his climax. Yep.
He wants to jizz in her throat as he slits it. And it's just
and what, pray tell, does Vittoria smell like before he wants to do that?
That would be musk.
And also the sentence is just, she smelled of musk, which is...
There are so many kinds of musk, and believe me, I know. Like, just to say she smelled of musk would be like saying like she smelled like a flower. Okay, you're a fucking writer, dude. Give me something to go on here. She smelled like elephant musk. Good. Finally. I know what you're talking about. I do, by the way.
I think that brings us to, we need to talk about how Vittoria gets introduced.
Before we get to her, can we talk about CERN a little first?
Please, 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 please. Let me get back to the columns.
I don't know what he's talking about when he talks about CERN. I'm just going to read some passages I highlighted from CERN here. Hold on.
Please do.
He's walking around the CERN campus as if to accentuate the collegiate atmosphere. CERN, by the way, is not collegiate. It's a research institution. Two long-haired hippies hurled a frisbee back and forth while enjoying Mahler's Fourth Symphony blaring from a dorm window. It's just... No. Okay. The brightest minds on earth. He has such a boner for these fucking guys at CERN. And there are plenty of smart people that work at CERN. I'm not saying they're not, but he fetishizes every single thing he talks about to the stupidest level possible. Halfway to the bottom, a young man jogged by. I'm just kind of skipping around here. His t-shirt proclaimed the message, "No gut, no glory." Langdon looked after him, mystified. Gut? General Unified Theory, Kohler quipped. His quip was the phrase General Unified Theory. The theory of everything. Also, those are different things. The General Unified Theory is not a theory of everything. But
the way that Dan Brown tries to make snarky jokes that don't even come close to qualifying as jokes that he insists are the most clever thing.
Oh, my God.
This is especially apparent in the signature way that he ends his books, but we'll get to that shit later.
I didn't even pick up on this before. He says General Unified Theory. It's actually, that's wrong. It's Grand Unified Theory. And a Grand Unified Theory, there are four forces that we know of in the universe. Gravity and three other ones. When you unify those other three, that's the Grand Unified Theory. A theory of everything is like something that unifies gravity as well. They're different fucking things. One is a theory without gravity. One's a theory with gravity. It's fucking stupid. I like this sentence. Are you familiar with particle physics, Mr. Langdon? By the way, Langdon doesn't have a doctorate, but he's teaching at Harvard also. This occurred to me many times. That's no, they wouldn't. Harvard's not going to hire someone who doesn't have a doctorate. They're only every single thing about. Well, we can get to this because this is after Vittoria is introduced. But this idea of why you would talk about CERN when you've apparently never been there or actually met any kind of scientist is totally beyond me. Like the easy details are so consistently wrong about this that I just got angrier and angrier and angrier reading it. This is like page 25, and already I was like, I hate this book this so much.
This opening chunk before the quote-unquote action starts it's
the worst part. It's interminable, and it's the worst part of the book from a variety of perspectives.
Because it doesn't start getting fast enough for you to stop paying attention to the minutia of what he's saying, because now he needs you to be as credible as possible. I want to talk about an art history thing that pisses me off in this first little bit that also checks the box of Dan Brown trying to make a joke and also checks the box of Robert needs to be smarter than everyone else. But despite its sterile name, Building C appealed to Langdon's sense of architectural style, conservative and solid. It had a red brick facade, an ornate balustrade. Balustrade? How do you fucking say that?
I've said, I'm not 100% sure, but I've said balustrade.
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 And sat framed by sculpted symmetrical hedges. As the two men ascended the stone path towards the entry, they passed under a gateway formed by a pair of marble columns. Someone had put a sticky note on one of them. This column is ionic. Physicist.
the jollity I'm experiencing.
Physicist graffiti, Langdon mused, eyeing the column and chuckling to himself. He does a lot of chuckling to himself.
He does. Well, you have to when you're that erudite.
I'm relieved to see that even brilliant physicists make mistakes. Kohler looked over. What do you mean? Whoever wrote that note made a mistake. That column isn't ionic. Ionic columns are uniform in width. That one's tapered. It's Doric, the Greek counterpart.
Oh my God.
A common mistake. Which fucking, first of all, both of those are fucking Greek. It being tapered is not the difference between Ionic and Doric columns. He's a fucking art history, symbology. That's the most I learned that in middle school. Are you
It's
fucking
like 5th grade.
Me?
Yes, this is like 5th grade shit. Yeah.
The genius scientists are making a joke about something being made of ions. Every single bit of like science humor in this is like a bad joke that your middle school science teacher would make, not the most brilliant scientists in the world.
This is 100% true. And this is actually something I have thought about this a lot. Whenever you look at science jokes online, they are A, always like at the most 7th grade level, and B, only there to make the person who gets them feel smart. They're never funny. It's just trying to be part of some club of quote unquote smart people, which is who this book is written for, I think. This is for people who want to read this and think, wow, I get it. I'm smart. I hate science jokes because they're like quote unquote science jokes because they're always fucking stupid. There are some funny ones out there that I've seen, none of which I can remember at this point. But yes, all the science humor, all the humor in this book is presented as you got to be real smart to get this one, but it's like 12-year-olds know this stuff.
Also, I'll finish that paragraph before I think I got angrier than I've ever gotten on this show. Kohler did not smile. The author meant it as a joke, Mr. Langdon. Ionic means containing ions, electrically charged particles. Most objects contain them.
Oh, most.
But,
also, again, ionic is a high school chemistry, at the most a high school chemistry term. This is not a term that needs to be defined for a fucking Harvard professor. I don't care. Any Harvard professor would remember this term. Leighton, you're not a science person. Do you know what ionic means?
That's what Maximilian Kohler just said, 100%.
Yeah. It's fucking stupid. Drives me insane.
It's another thing about this book and all Dan Brown books where everyone is the smartest person possible until it's convenient for them to be a fucking idiot for like That's 4 lines, which in Vittoria doesn't know iambic pentameter, but knows fucking, this obscure Galileo diagrammica, whatever the fuck. And then it's just like, iambic hootie whatty? Like, fuck off, please stop.
Yeah, I know. And don't forget, Leighton, and this is of course important, she disproved quote, one of Einstein's theories with tuna fish, which the less said about this, the better, because it really is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard.
And it's mentioned multiple times.
And it is at the page before the end, the penultimate page of this book, that is brought back. I wonder if this character knows yoga.
Okay, now
and does that make her good at fucking? Because I think it does.
We have to get the shit out of the way, man. We got to get it out of the way. Okay, so Victoria is coming. She's the adopted daughter of the murdered scientist who helped him with the antimatter shit. And I'm just going to read the way that she is introduced. A moment later, Vittoria Vetra emerged from the fuselage. Robert Langdon realized...
I'm so horny right now, just thinking about where this is going.
Robert Langdon realized today was going to be a day of endless surprises. Descending from the chopper in her khaki shorts and white sleeveless top, Vittoria Vetra looked nothing like the bookish physicist he had expected. Lithe and graceful, she was tall, with chestnut skin and long black hair that swirled in the backwind of the rotors. Her face was unmistakably Italian, not overly beautiful.
I love the negging. The negging is so
but
funny.
Possessing full, earthy features that even at 20 yards seemed to exude a raw sensuality. As the air currents buffeted her body, her clothes clung, accentuating her slender torso and small breasts.
It's incredible.
Miss Vetra is a woman of tremendous personal strength, Kohler said, seeming to sense Langdon's captivation. She spends months at a time working in dangerous ecological systems. She is a strict vegetarian and CERN's resident guru of Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga? Langdon mused. The ancient Buddhist art of meditative stretching seemed an odd proficiency for the physicist's daughter of a Catholic priest. It's not fucking Buddhist! Are you fucking serious?
That actually, I didn't know. It's not Buddhist.
It's Hindu. That's the origin. It's like Buddhists do it, but like the origin of it is Hinduism.
I knew it was India, but I didn't know. Yeah, okay, cool. Good to know.
This most basic... I have to stop.
I don't know anything about the other.
Stop. This is killing me.
Yeah, like, he's so horned up for this fucking character. You can feel Dan Brown getting a Dan boner while he's writing about this lady. He's like, yeah. Oh, nice. Oh,
Langdon watched Vittoria approach. She had obviously been crying, her deep sable eyes filled with emotions Langdon could not place. Can you really not fucking place them?
Yeah. By the way, title of ep, Langdon Night with Brian Wecht.
Perfect. I really wanted to name it I Could Be Your Angle or Your Demon.
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course. That's better. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Here's another thing that I want to bring up with this. This is very like r/men writing women, right? But I think what bothers me more about it is the way that Dan Brown sexualizes his characters. I would respect it infinitely more if Vittoria had stepped out of the helicopter and Robert Langdon thought like, wow, this bitch has banging titties. Mm-hmm. Like, there's something about the like, well, it's okay for me to sexualize her because she's smart and independent and sexy 100%. And has small boobies. Like, something about that bothers me so intensely because it's like only a respectable woman who is an academic and fit is someone I can be lusty for.
Yeah. Well, and it's also the thing where it is such a stupid cliche to be like, a hot scientist? What?
What?
You know, it's like people are attractive. Some people in science are attractive. Like, what is so shocking about this? I knew lots of scientists and some of them were hot. I don't know what to tell you. Like, male and female, it's going to happen. It happens quite often. Like, hot people exist. I don't know what to tell you, Dan Brown.
Clearly, Dan Brown thinks that all scientists are either disabled and have never felt the touch of a woman or are fat and in an air, whatever the fuck it is. That's what he thinks, clearly, because every single fucking one of his books has the sexy scientist sidekick. At least in Deception Point, there's the benefit of like, that character is a man, but he still sexualizes the female protagonist more than he does the male love interest, along with the whole fucking problematic as shit character of Gabrielle Ash, aide to Senator Sedgwick Sexton. Yeah, it's been a while since I read Deception Point. It fucking sucks, man. I hate it. It's bad.
And now, there's one question actually about Vittoria that I'm really confused about, which is, what does she wear on the lower half of her body? I feel like he doesn't address this ever. So, Leighton, can you enlighten me? What does Vittoria Vetra wear on the bottom half of her body? It's got to be like a skirt or pants, right?
And you know what? If he had put her in a skirt and heels like Bryce Dallas Howard in the new Jurassic Park movies, I would have respected it, because that's a blatantly misogynistic swing. Instead of this shit, which is she shows up in a tank top and shorts, and then he needs to remind us every 2 goddamn pages that she's in a tank top and shorts. The whole book, because this takes place in like a less than 24-hour period, and then she shows up in the Vatican, and then it's every fucking character giving her shit because she's in shorts, and then her being like, fuck you in Italian, I have a gun. It's the same, like, oh, a woman is sassy and she's wearing shorts? Whoa!
And is that even, so I don't know this, is that even a rule that you can't wear shorts in the Vatican? I don't know. But
I don't care.
Tourists go in the Vatican all the fucking time. Are they really, is there a ban on shorts? I mean, I don't want to break it to anyone, but Jesus can see inside those bad boys, and he knows what your legs look like. So I wouldn't think that, he knows what everything looks like, actually. I wouldn't think that shorts would be a problem, but okay.
Oh my God. So I'm scrolling through my highlights. I sense you've heard of antimatter, Mr. Langdon. Oh. Vittoria was studying him, her dark skin in stark contrast to the white lab.
The antimatter stuff. Okay. Let's talk about the antimatter stuff.
Please.
I'm in chapter 21 now.
Which it takes this long.
Yeah.
We're not even done with the exposition.
Langdon looked up. He felt suddenly dumb. Yes, well, sort of. A faint smile crossed her lips. You watch Star Trek. Langdon flushed. Well, my students enjoy. He frowned. Isn't antimatter what fuels the USS Enterprise? You got to say USS, obviously. She nodded. Good science fiction has its roots in good science. So antimatter is real? Okay. People have known that antimatter is a real thing forever at this point. Like many, many years. I mean, I forget when the first positron was discovered. 50s, maybe, something like that. Maybe earlier, I don't remember. But the existence of antimatter, hypothesized originally, I believe, by Dirac, famously, it's not a mystery that it exists, okay? The idea that antimatter is this thing where people are like, wait, that's real? What? Nobody knew that. No, it's so obviously real. I'm going to look this up right now. I'm going to guess positron was first observed in the 50s. Positron, first observation, 1932. 32. Okay. Oh, right. It was Anderson. Yeah, famously. So it's like super old at this point. It's not a fucking shock. And to present it as if it's this thing that the director of CERN would be like, wait, you're telling me. And also, by the way, there's some point, is it right here? Yes, here. Later, just a couple paragraphs down. Kohler scowled, but a vacuum would pull out the matter also. There would be no way to separate the particles. He applied a magnetic field. Matter arced right and antimatter arced left. They are polar opposites. At that instant, Kohler's wall of doubt seemed to crack. This is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard. This is high school level physics. Literally, the way magnetic fields act on charged particles is they act oppositely. The force equation has a charge in it. It goes opposite. This is how positrons are first observed. It's like they're going through a bubble chamber or whatever. It's got the same radius as the electrons going the wrong direction. This is basic fucking science. And that the director of CERN would be like, oh my God, he applied a magnetic field. It is high school, not even high school. It's like the most basic shit imaginable. This guy's supposed to be like the best particle physicist in the world, and he's losing his shit over the existence of a magnetic field pulling charged particles in different directions. It's so fucking stupid. Drives me nuts. Oh, here. He looked up. This is the next sentence where I stopped. He looked up at Vittoria in clear astonishment, and then without warning was overcome by a fit of coughing. Incredible, he said, wiping his mouth. And yet, it seemed his logic was still resisting.
He is disabled.
Oh my God. Anyway, this whole antimatter thing is so dumb. And it's, again, I don't know what science Dan Brown took. Well, I do, none. But it's just so astonishingly stupid. It blew my mind. Anyway, That's that. Yeah. Enough said about antimatter. Anytime he mentions, there was a line early on. I skipped this part because it's right in the middle of the two sections I just read. Antimatter is real, a fact of nature. Everything has an opposite. Protons have electrons. Up quarks have down quarks. The opposite of a proton is not an electron. It's called an antiproton, and it's fucking antimatter, by the way. The opposite of an up quark is not a down quark. I mean, in some vague sense, I guess maybe, but no one would call those opposites.
Oh, but Brian, just as long as you don't slander any quarks or mesons.
Oh, yeah, that's in there too. Don't slander.
From the fucking book.
Yeah. By the way, mesons are made up of quarks. It's whatever. Yeah. Everything has an opposite. Protons have electrons. I couldn't believe it when I read that. Opposite. Now, they're oppositely charged particles, sure, but they are not opposites. The antimatter counterpart to an electron is a positron. The antiproton is the antimatter equivalent of a proton made of antiquarks. It's fucking stupid. I hate this so much. I'm like visibly angry over this section of the book.
Here's another nitpick that I only know about because I did do a fair bit of Googling about like fact checking this book. Vittoria felt tears of frustration welling right below the surface. Bavarian Illuminati, New World Order, Steve Jackson computer games have the techies here play it on the internet.
Is that real?
It would be one thing if he brought it up and made up a new game. But he specifically mentions it's Steve Jackson computer games.
I played a bunch of Steve Jackson games when I was a kid.
It's a card game.
Yeah.
The specific game he's talking about is a fucking card game.
Insane.
Now, we need to talk about the dial tone. The dial tone issue.
Hit me with the dial tone.
So they're underground with the LHC, realizing that the antimatter canister has been stolen. They're getting the call from the Vatican. Vittoria wants to call the authorities because Maximilian Kohler has not yet, for reasons, and she whips out her cell phone to make a call, but that is foiled because turning away from Kohler, she snapped open her phone. You can't do that, he said. Just try and stop me. Her sultry eyes
blazing. Yeah.
Kohler did not move. An instant later, Vittoria realized why. This far underground, her cell phone had no dial tone. Now, what has a dial tone, Brian?
Oh, that would be a landline. Wait.
Is it a cell phone? So it would be one thing if he had said that once. He then proceeds to talk about his cell phone having a dial tone like 5 more times. And now it's very interesting that Jan Brown would acknowledge that when she's that far underground, her cell phone doesn't have a signal. Well, a big part of this book is the live feed of a security camera that's wireless that was stolen from the Vatican to broadcast an antimatter bomb that is counting down in real time, by the second, accurately. They don't know where the bomb is. They cannot trace the signal of the wireless camera that they know is in the compound, and they have the most advanced tracking shit, and they can't locate the signal of a shitty security camera? I digress. Later in the book, it's revealed that the antimatter canister is buried deep underground. You know, the rock upon which the church is built, or whatever the fuck. So, okay, so you agree that if something is that deep underground, it won't get a dial tone, but we have HD live to the second updates of the antimatter canister counting down. Yeah. Are you fucking kidding me?
By the way, extremely stupid. I'm just going to say this before I forget. There's actually a theorem that there's no stable equilibrium in magnetic fields. So you literally couldn't do the canister that suspends the antimatter in it. It's like actually impossible. Yeah. Anyway, but actually that doesn't bother me so much. I'll suspend disbelief to be like, okay, there's a canister full of antimatter. That doesn't really bother me. They found a fucking way. But yeah, that cell phone dial tone thing is stupid. The signal thing is dumb. And it's so, I don't know. There's just a million ways of getting around it too. We discovered a cord that was going up and taking the signal. It's like, you could address this in 2 sentences and not make it an issue.
And this is later. The guard took it, clicked it on, waited for a dial tone, and then apparently satisfied it was indeed nothing more than a phone, returned it to her. Vittoria slid it back into her pocket. Yeah. Also, this is while she's getting patted down and frisked. And the whole thing is about how she couldn't possibly be hiding under her tiny shorts, and Robert checked.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Tiny shorts. Oh, wait, here's a Post-it with a star on it. What does this mean?
Ooh,
I must have really hated this one. Oh, yeah, here's my favorite sentence in the book. Oxygen is an oxidant.
Oh, was this when they're in the archive?
Yes. Oxygen is an oxidant, so hermetic vaults contain very little of it. Oxygen is an oxidant? I hate that sentence so much.
What does he mean? What is he talking about?
Whatever. It's so dumb.
As I mentioned, I've been watching all of the 8 weeks of the trial of Letitia Stauch, who murdered her stepson. And a lot of that trial is playing hours of audio of her interrogations and staged phone calls that they did to get her to confess anything. This woman is an expert level bullshitter. She will talk in circles for hours and hours and hours. And when I've been listening to this nonstop. And so I listen to it and say out loud to myself, Letitia, what the fuck are you talking about? What are you talking about? And as I've been rereading Angels and Demons, I realized I've been doing the exact same thing of pacing around going, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?
I have not audibly reacted to a book this much in decades, perhaps. Here's another one. I'm just going to go randomly through this. This is when they first discovered that I think the Cardinals are about to be killed or whatever. Page 157 of mine. It's chapter 41. I like this too. In 90 minutes, it begins, the caller said with a note of finality. 1 an hour, a mathematical progression of death. 1 an hour, a mathematical progression. I mean, technically, sure, but it's not like there's a complicated math series that we're trying to figure out. The series goes counting. 1, 1, 1, 1. It's mathematical and that involves numbers. It's dumb. It's so dumb. I've said this a billion times.
I just scrolled past the fact that I highlighted that exact thing.
Yeah, a mathematical progression of death. Sounds horny. Oh, here's a note I wrote to myself. What languages does Vittoria speak? Because sometimes in the text, he will mention when she's speaking Italian. And he'll mention, presumably when she's not speaking Italian, she's speaking English. But then frequently characters will be like we said before, it's like, sposare la cappella. This is in section 36. You're leaving the chapel, or you're leaving to sweep the chapel. I do not understand why Italian characters are translating Italian to other Italian characters, which happens on literally every page of this book. And I look, I get it. I know that to make it accessible to us, we have to do that. But it's so intellectually dissatisfying to have this happen all the time. And
it's clumsy.
That's the problem. It's clumsy. And if he called it out, a little bit more. Langdon's there. She's going to talk in English to him. He doesn't speak much Italian. Okay, fine. But she does it to other Italians. It's so...
Well, yeah, and that's the thing that really bothers me. I hate when books do that because I really believe in the Cormac McCarthy school of never telling you, like, if you want it, you better work for it, because he will use like very colloquial Spanish too that's difficult to translate straight and then just be like, figure it out. I don't give a fuck.
But that's the Nabokov school, right?
I respect that immensely.
I'm going to write this in Russian. Good luck. And now here's something else in French. Well, fuck you. Here's another one I liked. This is from the end of chapter 84. This is about the ecstasy of St. Teresa. His great golden spear, filled with fire, plunged into me several times, penetrated to my entrails. A sweetness so extreme that one could not possibly wish it to stop. Langdon smiled. If that's not a metaphor for some serious sex, I don't know what is. Serious sex? I mean, look, as we know, that's how I have sex. My great golden spear, penetrating entrails. Yeah, sure. We've all done it. But
and I like that you thought that was an exaggeration by Dan Brown when that is actually accurate to the tale.
Yeah, I didn't know this sculpture, and I looked it up, and that lady's having a good time.
It's pretty sick. It's also not in the fucking church that he says it is. I forget which one it actually is in. And also the thing that he makes up about like, oh, the Pope forced it to be taken out of the building because it was too sexual. And also Bernini made it that way so it could be a signpost for the Illuminati treasure hunt.
Yeah.
Oh, here's one. Here's a camera woman for the BBC being introduced. Oh, yes. After the man partner of her is introduced and we don't talk about his weight at all. He turned to the back seat where his camera woman, Shanita Macri, sat silently polishing her glasses. She was always polishing her glasses. Shanita was black, although she preferred African American. A little heavy and smart as hell. Great sentence, Dan. She wouldn't let you forget it either. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I like that we needed to add that she was a little heavy.
A little heavy. I underlined that as well, yes.
I also, because Dan Brown's such an idiot, I assumed that, this character was British. And he had just put in African American.
She works for the BBC. She works for the BBC. That is a reasonable assumption.
Yeah, and it isn't until later that it's clarified that she's American. But
half the book later, yeah.
Yeah. But we have to mention that she's a little heavy.
I want to talk about this scene where he flashes back to his Symbology 212 class.
Oh, fuck. Oh, this one's so...
I think this may be the worst scene in the book. That's the worst scene in the book, as you correctly told me, is the scene where Vittoria is abducted with the assassin. That's the worst scene. The worst non-sex scene is, I think,
right,
the
and the other worst scene is
class.
The final pages. But yeah, this one is like Dan Brown's Straw Man 101.
Yeah. So he's talking about, let's see, formal Christian tombs were often misaligned with the architecture so they could lie facing east. It was an ancient superstition that Langdon's Symbology 212 class, in Harvard's Symbology department, obviously, had discussed just last month. That's totally incongruous, a female student in the front had blurted when Langdon explained the reason for east-facing tombs. Why would Christians want their tombs to face to the rising sun? We're talking about Christianity, not sun worship. Langdon smiled, pacing before the blackboard, chewing an apple.
I love that he's chewing a fucking apple in this scene. It's like as if this could not get any more hack. Have the professor smarmily munching on an apple.
Yeah, a thing you always do when you're teaching, by the way. As a fucking professor at one point, you know what I didn't do in class? Eat a snack. You'd bring some water. You wait an hour for your fucking lecture. It's so dismissive to be eating while you're teaching. So he's eating the apple. Mr. Hitzrot, he shouted. First of all, Hitzrot, a name that sounds like it's got to be an anagram for something. A young man dozing in the back sat up with a start. What, me? Langdon pointed to a Renaissance art poster on the wall. Who is that man kneeling before God? Anyway, this goes on, but this is a version of college that doesn't exist if it ever did. Also, this girl in the front who is religious, at some point, okay, let me cut next page. Conquering religions, he continued, often adopt existing holidays to make conversation less shocking. It's called transmutation, a word that, by the way, Dan Brown italicizes in the text. It helps people acclimatize to the new faith. Worshippers keep the same holy dates, pray in the same sacred locations, use a similar symbology, and they simply substitute a different god. Now the girl in the front looked furious. You're implying Christianity is just some kind of repackaged sun worship? So he has this stupid straw man figure.
Who, of course, has to be a woman.
Has to be a woman. And he's pissing her off, and he's like, Langdon's pretty excited that he's really sticking it to this.
Yeah, he's sticking it to her while he smarmily eats his apple superiorly. Yeah.
And then this idiot says, Hitzrot, I know something Christian that's original. How about our image of God? Christian art never portrays God as the hawk sun god or as an Aztec or as anything weird. It always shows God as an old man with a white beard. So our image of God is original, right? No one's going to... Look, I'm not saying Harvard students are all geniuses, because they ain't. But neither are any students. And it's just so lazy and stupid.
It's a thing that becomes really apparent with his writing, where he writes the smart thing that he wants to say, and then will twist himself into knots backward, like writing the conversation backwards and forcing everyone in the scene to be a total fucking idiot so he can shove in his smart sentence that he wants to say that makes Robert and him by proxy look so smart. Maybe do you have thoughts? Perhaps some thoughts on the blatant fucking racism in this book?
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, I don't know what else there is to say about it, except it's, as far as we can tell,
it's cartoonish.
It's cartoonish. Now, I will say...
Wait, sorry. You didn't even get to the worst part of that Symbology 212 scene.
Yeah, which is what?
The Aztecs.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Right, of course. I skipped over this, but at some point he says, the practice of God-eating, that is Holy Communion, was borrowed from the Aztecs. Now, I had to look up when exactly the Aztecs were around. I was like, wait, that's like, I don't know, 1300 or something. It's like 1300, which is, by the way, now here's a little rule of thumb that you can use to talk about Christianity and when the Aztecs were in relation to Christianity. That number 1300, that's not just a random number. That generally refers to the number of years after the start of Christianity that something happened. And to say that the communion was borrowed from the Aztecs, a society that didn't exist until like 1,000 fucking years after the beginnings of Christianity is so insane. And how that could get past anybody is totally beyond me. I do not understand.
Because he means it is like a gotcha of like, bet you didn't know this one. Well, yeah, nobody knew it because it's made up. It's made up. Robert Langdon should be fucking fired.
Well, you know what? I don't think he's on the payroll because he doesn't have a PhD. He's Mr. Langdon. And this is definitely a guy, by the way, who would absolutely correct everybody if he had a better title. So if he was Dr. or Professor Langdon, why he's not Professor Langdon is absolutely, if he teaches a college class in the U.S., he's a professor. Why he's not constantly asking people to call him Professor Langdon is nuts.
Because he's insufferable.
Yeah,
everyone
that's
calls
what I mean.
Literally, as one of the cardinals is dying, one of them is like, this is hell. The other one is literally actively drowning after being branded and is just like, that guy has kind eyes.
Yes, I noticed that. Yeah, he's surrounded in chains at the bottom of the fountain or whatever. And he looks at Robert Langdon who's trying to save him and is like, this guy gets it.
Right, and then he dies.
Peacefully. He drowns. He dies peacefully. Dan Brown goes out of his way to say that guy dies peacefully. We're an hour and a half in. It feels like we've been doing this for 5 minutes. I could do this all night.
I know, me too. Do we make this a two-parter?
I think we might.
We can milk 2 episodes out of this. We just slap it in half. The first one is I Could Be Your Angle, and the second one is called Or I Could Be Your Demon.
Let's do that. Why don't we end part 1 here?
It'll be a cliffhanger, like every chapter of Angels and Demons.
Yeah. Slowly, he turned on the light. A pair of dark eyes looked back at him. Bum, bum, bum. All right, we're going to stop here. What's popping for me this week is everything but this book.
Yeah, what's popping is every blood vessel in my brain.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we'll come back next week for part 2.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Late Night is produced by Brian Wecht, Leighton Gray, and Jarek Centeno. Follow us on Twitter at Leighton Night, on Instagram at Leighton_Night, or email us at leightonnight@gmail.com.